whole fridge. This is the DLLS Stars Emergency Pod, presented by Bud Light and Happiest Hour. Take two. That's right. Second emergency pod of the day. This time, though, we traded out Sam for Sean. I'm not sure which one is paying attention more or less, but we'll take it either way. Big thank you to our producer, Elijah Smith, for... Yep. I grabbed the wrong beverage, guys. You don't want to see me walk out and do it. Let's get to it. Elijah cut back from his busy schedule to make sure that he was able to produce this. It almost didn't happen tonight. But the big news of the day, Mason Marchment has been traded by the Dallas Stars to the Seattle Kraken in exchange for a third-round pick in 2026 and a fourth-round pick, which kind of humorously enough used to belong to the Dallas Stars way back when, and that's a 2025 fourth rounder. Sean will probably be able to tell you the story. I can too, but I want to let him say something. But this, guys, we'll start with Sean because he wasn't on our show today. This is all about, I mean, look, the picks are nice. This is all about salary cap space.
Oh, yeah, 100%. This was swapping out Mason Marchment to make space for the Matt Duchene deal. And this is a deal that of course, it's one of those funny things that people are willing to open up and tell you this now, but the framework of this deal had been in place this morning, apparently. So I spoke to someone after this deal came through. The Stars and Kraken had this, it kind of came down to whether, it wasn't a question of whether Mason Marchment was going to Seattle today. It was more a question of which picks were going. And I believe that, and talking to some people after the deal went through, it's basically, that was the holdup and why this happened now, as opposed to getting announced almost at the same time as the Duchene deal, because these two are obviously moving out Marchment. Duchene takes his money, and it's this reality, the cap world. And for the Stars, it's probably not the last. It's not the last move that we're going to see in the next couple of days or so when it comes to moving things around. So it's kind of one of those things where the Stars, if they, in a perfect world where the cap isn't an issue, Mason Marchment's probably back, but you couldn't keep him and Matt Duchene and do some of the other things Dallas wants to do.
Let me ask you, Sean. So is this a case of other teams knowing that Dallas is in a pinch right now, trying to do some things? Because in my opinion, I thought he would command more than a third and a fourth, or is that just kind of where his value is?
It's kind of where his value is. I mean, if you're going to go through and you look at what was the trade that Nashville made yesterday when they spent, who did they land yesterday? What was the deal? It was, I'm drawing a blank on this. Nashville made the move yesterday. I can't remember which player they brought back, but
if you keep vamping for a second, I'll look it up for you.
Yeah, but it was a ECHL player and like a third or fourth or whatever that would.
It appears that the trade June 18th was for Eric Halla.
Yeah, they brought Eric. So Nashville.
That's right.
Nashville brought Eric Halla back yesterday, and it's.
By the way, Darren in the chat got it faster than I did.
Yeah, and so the Marchment's kind of value was teams. The timing tanked his value a bit, right? Like he probably brings back a little bit more. If teams don't know that the Stars are dealing from a cap perspective, but getting two picks from this, it's not a bad thing, and no team was going to give prospects. That was kind of one of the things that I kind of heard on the market of this was no team was really willing to give away a high level prospect for Mason Marchment, and Jim Nill wasn't really interested in mid level prospects. If you're Dallas, you'd rather have that draft capital than.
Well, hold on. Before you continue, can you explain to people watching right now what you mean by high-level prospect versus mid-level? What's the distinction there?
So, like, if you're Dallas, like, let's just, because this is the Stars podcast and our listeners know the Stars system better than anyone else, right? So, if a team, if for a Stars perspective, the Stars don't need more Mete Blumels. They don't need more Justin Ritzkovians. That's not what you try to add in the trade market. So, of course, you go around and you'd like to try to add someone who's in the, you weren't going to get a Maverick Borg, but someone like kind of like in the tier between there, a guy who is a bona fide future NHL or maybe not a star. And no team was really willing to split with Mason, really willing to give that price for Mason Marchment. And then all of a sudden it became, well, here's a bunch of possibilities for either AHL level players that might not be any more than that. And then it just becomes, if you're Jim Nill, okay, these draft picks become more valuable. And then the big thing that, now I want to be clear, this did not come from a Stars source, but this came from someone else from a league, from another team, texted me after this deal came through, and they said, I wouldn't be surprised, and they didn't know if it was going to happen or not, but they wouldn't be surprised if one of those 2 picks in this Marchment deal are then used as the sweetener to get someone to take Matt Dumba's contract.
Ooh,
now, that's something where, to be clear, that's not something that came from somewhere within the Stars organization, but someone from around the league who has a pretty good pulse of things said, I wouldn't be surprised. Jim's really smart. He's probably going to now try to take that pick tomorrow and move it to someone else to take Dumba's contract. So I wouldn't be shocked if that happened.
Luds, I want to ask you about what the Stars are losing in Mason Marchment, because he's 30 years old. He is obviously a big body. 6'5", 212 is his listed weight. He plays a big game at times, but more importantly, 22 goals each of his last 2 years, 53 points last year, 47 points this year. I know the playoffs weren't what he wanted, and the penalties are an issue, but what are the Stars losing by making this trade?
Well, they're going to lose a few untimely penalties, like you mentioned. I know that that's been kind of a topic here this year about Mason, but I mean, I think he's a good player, to be honest with you. I think if we would have seen a little bit more of using that 6'5", 220-pound frame in another way, you know what I mean? And just add a little bit more of that, because I believe that that's kind of a piece that we're looking for, a couple of those pieces. But and then again, I think when Mason is healthy and Tyler Seguin is healthy, we lose the potential of that line getting back to where they were, whether it was the beginning of this year or going back to last year. I mean, there's obviously some chemistry. We talked about that to Matt Duchene this afternoon.
And had a busy day.
Yeah, again, I think that three in one day, that definitely got to be another day off. I'm just throwing that out there, man. I know what you're going to say.
Support.
This was never in the contract, 3 in 1 day. So anyway, no, I seriously, I really, there was a lot more times than not that I liked Mason Marchment as a player. And again, as a person, we had him on the show, and he's obviously a good kid. But maybe what's down the line is a Stanley Cup, because he was with the Florida team, and then a couple of years later they win a Stanley Cup, and then win another Stanley Cup. And so maybe this is a premonition of another Stanley Cup coming team from that he leaves. So we'll see. But again, to me, as everything goes, I mean, what's going to determine this is what do they get out of this whole thing. And you're going to look back and say, this is the player that replaced the Mason Marchment. Now look at where this team is.
Sean, talking about what they lose and the best of Mason Marchment, I want to say from my perspective that the best I've seen Mason Marchment play was before he took the puck to the face and suffered that awful facial fracture and then had to go through, being out, then putting the bubble back on. I'm not saying he wasn't a productive player after that, but he was playing with a supreme amount of confidence. He was scoring. He was making plays. He wasn't just that sort of discombobulated, kind of on the edge of out of control all the time. I actually thought it was the best I saw him on his skating as well as his playmaking and getting to the right areas. And that, I'm not saying it derailed his season, but it also halted what was maybe the best form he ever had in Victory Green. I think Sean muted his mic.
Sorry, I did mute my mic.
There was a dog bark in the background.
There was, and so I had tried to handle that. It's I don't want to make excuses for dealing with the injury. Other people dealt with it. And, I mean, other players have played through things like that. So I think part of the not issue, but with Mason Marchment's game and time in Dallas is he clearly had, and it's ironic that Matt Duchene signing is the reason he's out, because Matt Duchene was really what Mason Marchment, but Mason Marchment found chemistry, and then the Tyler Seguin's injury happened, and he just never really found that again. And I think there's sometimes, and Luds, you can talk to this, I think sometimes players get a little bit too attached to a certain chemistry or line and keep looking for that to happen. And I don't know if Mason Marchment ever found his way in Dallas where he had his own success. And I think that's something where just there was too much. He was reliant on playing with those other two guys. And when he was kind of taken away from that, or it didn't work, he never really forged on and did his own success. And if you're going to make $4.5 million, you got to be your own driver sometimes. And I think, Luds, you can probably talk a little bit more to that. There's sometimes where sometimes you need the safety blanket to be gone. You need to prove you don't need the safety blanket.
Here's what I think I got caught saying the most from when we're doing games and sitting up there on the couch in the studio watching the games. How many times our former producer, the guy that defected,
Trader
Anderson, by the way, how many times he probably heard me say, shoot that puck. And when you talk about Mason's game, I think when the chemistry came together for those three guys, now they became kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters in a way, where things were going in the net for him. But I felt like from Mason's standpoint, he needed to add more of the size game to it and create more chances and create some space in front of the net, where I think that, I look at the way Stan Colvin played and the way Steele plays and Blackwell, when they get the puck, they shoot the pucks and they go to the net and they go there and they create more havoc if it doesn't go in the net. And I think there were times that Mason was deferring a little too much for me. And in some of what Owen loves to write down is the high danger, high quality scoring chance. He passed.
You love to bring that up.
I love bringing it up, but I would like to see you, Owen, have a check mark by them all the time when you wrote that down and say he should have shot that puck there.
Yeah,
like, that's a good, because again, sometimes what happens is when they get this chemistry and they want to make that extra pass, they start to drift further away from the good quality scoring chances, and not only, and so Mason, instead of when Tyler had the puck or when Matt had the puck, he may just fade off to the backside where he could drive to the front of the net, and we create some more of that hard play against in front of the opposing goaltender, which in my opinion carries over when you get into the playoffs and you don't get interior because you've had success and you've done it a certain way. So that's really my only criticism. I'm telling you, I really thought he was going to be a player that would be here for a while, as long as he would kind of sprinkle that in. He didn't have to be that, the Bob Probert kind of guy. Just use that size and create some more space for the people you're playing with.
Sean, I want to tee you up on something, but I really like what Luds just said, because Mason Marchment's 30, but because he was a bit of a late bloomer, it didn't feel like he was 30 on his tread tires, right? It felt, or tire tread, that would be the right way to say it. It kind of feels like he had more mileage to go because of that, because he, sort of emerged into the NHL a little bit later than the typical prospect would be. And it also was part why he was the more unconventional, with whether it be his skating style or just his general looking like he was always on the verge of an amazing play or landing like an albatross and crashing through everything. And then I see on Twitter and Instagram, it was tweeted, I believe, by the Stars, or actually it was by Victory Plus, but Instagram, Jake Ottinger just sent out about an hour ago now, a picture of the two of them hugging, which was a staple after victories, with the heartbroken emoji and then love you mush with a tagging, of course, Marchment. And that tees up Sean, because they seem to be trading away all of Jake Ottinger's best golfing buddies
on the same day. Do you know what today is the anniversary of?
Is this Ty Dellandrea Day?
Today is the exact. It's a 1 year anniversary of them trading away Ty Dellandrea,
and it's also the day that Luds won the Stanley Cup.
Yes, that's the more important thing.
Yeah, probably.
But here's to that.
Yes, cheers to that. Cheers to that.
Forget about that already.
Oh wait!
How about that? There's our producer.
There we go. Yes, back-to-back June 19th now. Jake Ottinger has lost a golfing buddy that was actually painted on his mask. And so
in the cart, right?
Yes. So it's kind of one of the reality. It's funny because a lot of this where we are right now with the coaching changes, and it's not the only reason, but it's the whole Jake Ottinger handling with Pete DeBoer and everything like that. That's the big point of the conversation. But it's also kind of a funny thing about how this all works. And there's still, when it comes to players and teams, it's a good reminder of how much, and Luds, once again, you know this better than I, each team is only a 1-year thing, right? Nothing is promised, right? You never, once you play with that team and you play that, and you might, even if there's, like when you go into that playoffs, you're like, this is the last time for this group. We know that. You don't know, you might know some guys who might be gone. And I think it's a good reminder of that just sometimes in a sports world and a hockey world where there's a lifetime friendship there for those two, right? But they may have played their last hockey game together and not even realized it at the time. And that's just kind of it sucks for them, but it's also one of the things you get when you're a pro athlete. I'm sure, Luds, you had that where you played a last game with a guy and you didn't know it was the last game you had with a guy and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wonder, I played with some great guys and they're great friends. And we're going to have a couple of them great friends, by the way, on the show on Tuesday. So, but you're tight,
Yeah.
You're tight, but you have to be able to give each other some conservative, sometimes from the right kind of criticism during a game. They have to make certain plays. You still have to hold each other accountable. Yeah. Sometimes when you have that relationship, when you're too close, you kind of let some things slide when you should be, especially if you're a leader and you got a letter and you're too tight to some people. You don't hold your teammates accountable. That was what was so good about the teams that I played on. It could be Mo. Well, not Mo, not necessarily. But, he just wasn't. He didn't have that person. But I'm talking about Joe Newendike and Brett Hull and Mike Keane, and I can go down the list. Carbo for sure. And Carbo and I were very, very tight. It's Chris Chelios. But when I didn't make the right play, I got reminded of it, and vice versa. And it was like so. And I think sometimes maybe you can get too close. And you talk about guys that are men. I love you guys, and I just wonder sometimes could you guys have held each other a little bit more accountable during play?
One thing on that, Luds, wasn't there something too? And it's one of those where it's like, you don't want to throw a guy under a bus on this, and this is forever ago, but like, obviously you trade for Sergei Zubov. You can get Sergei Zubov. You do it every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But part of it also was you have Kevin and Darian, they're brothers and they're close. But from everything I've talked to, Darian started holding guys way more accountable after Kevin was gone. After he lost his brother, he was became a much better leader, right?
Yeah, and really what it was, and to this day, I mean, I don't know if I've seen a lot of brothers, but I don't know if I've ever seen two brothers that were actually that close, and it affected them. It did, and I think Darian would say that, because they were tight together and off the ice, on the ice, and during games, and I think and again for two guys that are leaders in themselves, to be able to hold each other accountable, if anything. I've heard horror stories with McSorley's. Throwing pitchforks at each other and stuff like that in the barn, and the Sutters and all those guys. But they love each other, but they would hold each other accountable and be hard on them when it's work, because this is still a job. This is business. Yes. You're going to work. You're going to work for 60 minutes a night, and you go to work and you get into whatever workplaces you're in, and there's times when one of your coworkers makes a mistake, and now all of a sudden he makes you look bad too. You got to be able to hold those people accountable and say, man, we're here to get a job done, and we're all going to work together at it.
Okay, so our boss was texting me right as we were starting, saying you don't need to do an hour here because you have a show tomorrow where you can get deep dive, and that's true. But if we were to just sort of step back and look at this, and I'll start with Sean here, is this framing basically getting rid of Mason Marchment so you can re-sign Matt Duchene? I know the numbers add up because it's $4.5 million each way. Is that a fair way to look at this, or is this just the beginning of a much larger move by Jim Nill?
I think it's a little column A, little column B, where it is definitely you couldn't have both, right? You couldn't keep both Matt Duchene and Mason Marchment, so you had to do that. It's also it takes away it creates some other flexibility you needed to have. Now you have the option to if you can make that other move, you can maybe go bring back Mikael Granlund, and you can maybe do that. Now, when you go and sign Jamie Benn to his contract extension in a 35+ deal, you have a little bit more flexibility with what you can do with that. So this is all part of a larger roster cap figuring out. But at the end of the day, there's a reason. We can't ignore that Matt Duchene signed for the exact same amounts that Mason Marchment was making. And I think it was intentionally pushed out to 4 years to get to that cap hit. So to make that work. So you can't, the two aren't unequal, but you have to look at larger picture, and it's kind of a little bit of both there.
We're going to be able to talk about.
I'm interested in finding out, like, are the Dallas Stars going to change their identity a little bit more playoff?
That was just what I was going to ask you.
But you know what I mean? Like, are we going to bring in another Mason Marchment, or are we going to bring somebody in with size that maybe has a little bit more bite, maybe isn't as much of a playmaker, but more of all the qualities that we talked about? So that's kind of what I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I think Sean is exactly right. I mean, we just saw dollar for dollar go in, go out, because when they signed Matt Duchene, that didn't change the identity of the team. If you're talking about a playoff thing, he's an important piece to this when you want to, because Matt, you know what? It was funny. Matt said it today. We were disappointed that we didn't score more goals. Remember when he said that?
As a line, yes, as a line.
The hair on the back of my neck went up a little bit there. I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe we could play a little harder in front of our net. And, and maybe if you'd have created some more space for each other in front of the other goaltender, a couple of those goals would have gone in. So we'll see where that all plays out.
And to that end, part of what I was going to ask you is you see these moves and you see that clearly the Stars are not just going to walk it back the exact same and hope for a better result. Is that encouraging to you, Luds, that it looks like they are going to have to shake it up, whether it's for cap reasons or otherwise?
It's encouraging to me because I missed out on the float this year. We were guaranteed a float in the parade. It's gone out the door. So change it up a little bit. But again, I don't even know if that promise will hold water.
I was going to say, is that in perpetuity, or was that just for this year?
Yeah, exactly. See, I think they want us to forget about that. We're going to have to make sure we bring this up periodically.
I think we will definitely. The next time we have Jim Nill on.
I think our new producer, Elijah, could probably get on that little sound clip that from that day when Jim made that statement.
Oh, we could clip that.
We could just throw that in there every once in a while next year.
All right, Elijah, I will go find the time so you don't have to go searching, because I know when he was on, and we'll get to work on that. Sean, since you are not on tomorrow's show, I'll give you the last word here. The next step, besides Mason Marchment being moved, they're back to basically the same cap space, about $5 million that they had at the beginning of the morning. What do you think is the next shoe to drop, the next, piece to go into place?
Well, it's funny because we talked about Jake Ottinger's golfing buddies, and in addition to Mason Marchment, his most frequent golfing partners this year were Brendan Smith and Matt Dumba. So Jake is going to be looking for Jake is probably going to be looking for new golf partners.
A whole new foursome.
A whole new group probably within the next 48 to 72 hours. So that's what I'll say is the next shoe to drop, or however we want to call it. So that's the next thing that's really going to go. And then it's going to be interesting to see. Someone mentioned to me the other day about when it comes to the Jamie Benn contract, that it's probably going to be one of those. It's might not get done on July 1, just because Jim might be like, "Hey, Jamie, we don't know what our contract is going to. We don't know," because for the quick refresher, a 35+ deal means you can sign Jamie to a $4 million deal. You could do a $1 million in base salary and $3 million in performance bonuses, which means you could knock it to the following year. So Jamie Benn's deal will probably be one of the last deals done for the Stars, just so it can be just done to fit into exactly how much space they have for this year's cap. So that's one thing. So don't anyone like, I laughed the other day where someone said someone tweeted, word is Jamie Benn's going to come back to Dallas. No, we can't swear, right? Can we? Whatever.
I would say it's a good
yes.
bet. You can't.
Yeah. So no crud.
That
Jamie Benn will be back in Dallas. We just know that will be a later deal, probably based off what space is there to be performance bonuses versus base salary. And I think the next big one internally will be the discussion with Mikael Granlund of, okay, we have a little bit more of this space. We can get something done here to try to maybe maneuver before July 1st. That one comes into play here. I think that's the next kind of big one as they also work on moving things out.
Hey, Sean, does that scenario that you had with Jamie kind of handcuff him a little bit? Because if he doesn't get, and he sits there waiting and waiting and waiting, you know, with other teams that may be interested in his services. And at the end of the day, when these deals get done, you know, I don't know if there's any money left over for me kind of thing. Or do you think that relationship is tight enough? You don't have to
I think that relationship is tight enough between Jim and Jamie. And I think it's just how Jamie's money is going to be structured. Whether it's I don't know exactly what the number is, but I'm pretty sure somewhere in Jim Nill's head, he knows Jamie Benn is probably a $3.5–4 million player next year. And value wise, now you could do $1 million of base salary and do for 20 games played, another $1.5 million, and 30 games, and the other $1.5 million. And then that would just roll over to the 26, 27.
26, 27.
Speak about crazy stuff.
Yep.
That would roll over to 26, 27.
Just don't start talking about feeling old in your early to mid 30s.
I'm not. And so that's how that scenario.
He did on musical chairs yesterday, Luds.
Well, I was old for that show. For the 26 to roll to the 26, 27. So I think Jim and Jamie have that drawer deal in place where they know how much money Jamie Benn is going to get on his next deal for a year. They just don't know whether it's going to be, hey, here's a base salary or here's a performance bonus that we roll to next year. It's just, and so I don't think there's any risk of that happening.
Boy, it's a busy time, guys, because we've got all this going on. There'll be more. The buyout window, the first buyout opens tomorrow, I believe, and we'll go to June 30th. And the Stars still don't have a head coach. So big thank you to everybody who joined us on this emergency pod. I'm going to say this will be the last one of the night, whether or not there's anything else going on.
Don't say that. The fact you said it. No, now they're going to go hire someone.
There's no way Thursday. Okay, I'll stop there.
You don't talk about pace of play. You don't talk about the emergency pods you did in the game.
I'm not afraid to say shutout or no hitter. You know why? Because my words aren't going to change the universe.
I know, but whenever I have something family-wise planned, Jim makes a move, right? Like multiple times today, I was in the middle of doing something, and that's when I got notification something was coming down the pipe. So
it's really
I do
hard
know
to make
that
plans around this time of year, isn't it?
Never make plans. That's the rule.
All right. Luds, Sean, Elijah, thank you, everybody, as we do our second emergency pod of the day and hopefully last. Don't forget, we have a show tomorrow, 1 o'clock, Friday afternoon. Leah Asimakopoulos will be here from the Dallas Morning News. Luds and I will be with her in studio. We'll talk about all this and much, much more right here on DLLS.
Get out of here first.
We all silly like the mayor.